So those of you who do not know me, my name is Reverend Veronica Valles. I have a focused ministry called Sacred Living, and I provide peace tools in schools. I teach mindfulness to children, and had an amazing conference yesterday, the Compassion Conference. But today we're going to talk about living in answered prayer. I'm going to post this video on Facebook because we didn't get a chance to bring it up. But how many times have you planted a seed, an idea, and stood over it screaming at it? All right, it's almost like Amazon Prime. Hey, what's my ETA? You know, I have put in my order, universe. I want it now. But in this video, what we see is how a seed actually grows. It's a time lapse where it has to literally, in the darkness and the unknown and the uncertainty, it's feeling this impulsion, this divine intelligence. There's a pattern that's inherent in that seed, and it's starting to wiggle and squiggle, and all of a sudden it bursts open, but it's being drawn to the light, and then the roots are coming down to be anchored in the soil. But it takes time in the human experience, and we forget that because I want it, and I want it now. And so living in an answered prayer is like, how do we maintain our awareness that in the mind of God, the very thing that we have planted, that idea, which by the way, it's actually not our idea. Because if it's all God, it's a living idea of the mind of God as your life, your incarnation. You're that one that's magnetizing that idea. Ernest Holmes says that we are spiritual broadcasting systems. We're radiating messages, we're receiving it. And so once an idea downloads, David Lynch, the filmmaker, has a master class, and when he's talking about creative ideas, he does the analogy of like he's fishing. He puts like a little hook into the water, and he waits to see what arises, and that's when he knows that's his. So first of all, that idea is a living idea in the mind of God that is your very life. And we're the ones that then get to water that seed, because the divine pattern is already inherent in that idea. So for myself, ministry was an idea, but the seed wasn't the seed that I thought it was going to be, because I thought I was going to be a pulpit minister. But then the idea downloaded that I'm going to teach children mindfulness. So how often that this idea comes to us, it's really loud, it's really clear, we plant it, and we forget that there's something already inherent within it. There's a divine pattern of perfection in this idea. My job, as I'm co-creating with this divine intelligence, my job then is to be that sacred space and that place from which it can unfold. But the demonstration is the way that the divine is activating this seed, this inherent pattern, in, through, and as our life. Our job is to maintain that consciousness. And so what we struggle with is the in-between. Because in the mind of God, it's already done. But like I said, I do my little Amazon Prime order. When's it going to arrive? Hey, they said 8 a.m. It's already 10 a.m. It's not here. So how many times have we done that with something that we've planted? Or is that just me? You know, I'm just saying, all right? And so we become aware of our tendencies to want to either hurry up the process, but sometimes it's our tendencies to disrupt the process. So I was on Facebook and in Instagram, there's this woman named Gigi Maddle, and she went to Burning Man, and she had this picture of this stop sign, but instead of saying stop, it said receive. All right, so it's read receive. And she wrote, subliminally stop, consciously receive. And I thought that is perfect for this conversation. Because what's happening in our unconscious and our subconscious is that thing that needs to stop if it's that thing that blocks us from our good. And it becomes pretty inherent in the words that we use. But, well, I wanted this but, or we get distracted, or we feel fear, or we have doubt, which is just the human experience. And that's that subliminal, that subconscious block of our good. Essentially, we're just kind of stepping on the seed, or we're digging it up. And to consciously receive is then to open yourself up to the lens, that the clarity of your lens of perception opens the avenues of your reception. So the very first thing is, where am I stopping myself? Where is fear being stronger than that impulse of love that is seeking to reveal itself? Because if this is a living idea in the mind of God, and it's seeking to express as my life, because you're that experience and that expression of God, and then I'm having fear, doubt, distractions, or that bigger but, then I inhibit the growth of it. Now, this isn't about shame or blame. This is about doing our spiritual work. It's about our meditation. It's about affirmative prayer. It's about gratitude. So in order for the demonstration to unfold, I'm not in God's business. I'm not in the how. I leave the how up to the divine. I stand in the knowingness that it is so. So to live in answered prayer is to cultivate the consciousness, to fertilize the seed, water the seed, and actually love the seed up so that when it arrives, I am ready. I allow, I accept. And in that process of allowing and accepting, I must be present. So oftentimes we put in a seed and we want it a specific way. Now, if you start taking classes, they're pretty clear. Don't detail too much because you're messing up whatever good is seeking to reveal itself. So for myself, if I didn't listen to that seed of just ministry, I would have been like, hey, I don't want to run a nonprofit. I don't want to teach kids mindfulness. I'm supposed to be a pulpit minister. No, my seed was ministry. How can I serve? Where should my gifts be added to this world? That was the seed that was planted. And when the download came, I had doubts. I had fears. I had reservations. And thank you to my prayer partner, we moved through that. But I had to also know that if this is a living idea in the mind of God, and I'm that sacred space and place from which it's going to reveal itself, then I must trust. I must know. And I must allow. So how often do we get the idea, but you're like, oh, yeah, I can't do that? How often does the idea arrive maybe in a different form? It's like, that's not the package I ordered. Does it have a return label? All right, I got to send this one back to God. Or do we embrace it saying, hey, here's a different possibility? I did say this and something greater, didn't I? And so what we do when living in answered prayer, we must be really clear that in our prayer work, that we are aligning in what we call the divine qualities. That the outer expression is the inner revelation of the divine qualities. Am I seeking to experience and express more love? Am I seeking to experience and express more joy? Am I seeking to experience and express more beauty? Am I allowing the wisdom of God to unfold in a certain situation? Am I actually allowing and accepting and knowing that my good is available now? So the living idea, first of all, inherent within it is a pattern of perfection. My job then is to actually know that through my prayer work, through the aligning in my meditation, through the understanding that no matter what the appearance may be, I have declared into this universal law that I don't need to coerce. I do not need to control, Ernest Holmes says. I do not need to concentrate. I just need to know that the law, that aspect of God that is the soil in the seed analogy, it's doing its thing. That the divine intelligence, that literally when you look at a tree and all of a sudden it's asleep and the leaves emerge from nothing, that is the perfect example that there's an intelligence that is greater than me. That there's a pattern of perfection that is inherent within that tree, within those seeds, that is being activated upon by something greater, and it is blooming. And if the tree can bloom, and if the caterpillar can become a butterfly, then surely my life and the creativity that is my life and the gifts that are my life, and not of the ego, but of the understanding that this is the way that God gets to show up, surely then that divine intelligence that is operating out, which what I can see, is operating in as my life. And Ernest Holmes says, the law is not only operating within us, it's operating around us. My job is to pay attention to the clues. My job is when there's that little inner nudge that says, go right, I go right. Or go left, I go left. Or someone says, hey, you need to meet that person, and I actually make the phone call. I'm watering the seed. I'm listening. I'm following the path. So living in answered prayer is the embodiment of what we are actually seeking to actualize is already present. And I am going to allow and accept it. And to know that every single step of the way will be demonstrated. Every single step of the way. I may not know the how. My job is to stay present. My job is to stand in the good. My job to know and surrender that that which is greater is revealing my good. And then I take a look at the beliefs and the patterns that subliminal stop. Is it the voice of my mother? Is it the voice of my father? Is it the voice of a teacher? Is it the voice that is inherent in our DNA? Because we carry the code of our ancestors, all right? It's like, what is that voice? And if that voice is not operating for your highest good, if that voice is not aligning in your yes, then your job is to bless it and let it go. And then to stand in that understanding that if it wasn't yours to be, because it's all about the being and the becoming, then the idea would not have arrived at your doorstep, all right? And here's the beautiful thing about ideas. They're infinite. The possibilities are infinite. I get to choose. I get to choose where I place my attention. I get to choose what direction I'm actually going to take. I get to understand that there is a process. So I'm reading this book called Made by Stephanie Land. And it's fascinating because here's a woman, when you read this book, and sometimes we have to be very careful in New Thought because there's always people checking our consciousness, all right? I call them the consciousness police, you know? It's like, hey, you know, what's in your consciousness, you know? And it's like, I'm just asking for prayer, you know? But it's like we see certain life circumstances, and oftentimes if people are judging other people because they're not willing to look here. My job is to just lift you in love through whatever the circumstance is. But here's this young woman living in Portland, and she's working in the service industry, and it's really challenging because it's a very expensive area right now, and she's making minimum wage, and just trying to make her way in the world, and she gets pregnant. And in getting pregnant, the boyfriend no longer wants to be for her, he gets abusive. And then so she takes her daughter, like at a year old, goes into a shelter. And all of a sudden she's living off of 7 governmental programs. And she's having to deal with the judgment of people too. So she's going to buy food and she's got her card and some dude over there is like, hey, you're welcome. Like, hey, my taxes are paying for you, as opposed to, oh, how grateful that you can have food. And so she's going through this process of shame. She's going through this process of just the burden of being a single mom, living on government assistance while working full time, all right? And this book then evolves into how she becomes a maid and all the different things that she sees in people's houses. But here's the thing about Stephanie Land. She had always known she wanted to be a writer. All right, so you could look at this first part of the book, because I'm like about 3/4 in, and you could judge her. Or you could be present that there is something greater that's seeking to reveal as her life, but there's a process to it. And every choice that she makes is adding to that process, but it doesn't feel like it. There's despair. There's a second boyfriend who kicks her out. There's this her trying to just make a living for her and her daughter. There's just her desperation. But then there's that something inside of her that is pulling her forward that I'm taking care of my daughter. I'm going to be independent. I'm, trying to get off of government assistance. And she's working her way through jobs that most people don't appreciate. But later on, and I haven't gotten to that part yet, but I read this little article from her. Somehow, she connects with a nonprofit that takes people who are living in poverty, but who have this ability to write, who want to actually share about their experiences. So there's a greater understanding of how social justice can work with someone. All right? So here's this challenge and this poverty and government assistance and working her tail off as a maid. And if you looked at this whole process, it does not look like anything's getting ready to bloom. But every step along the way takes her to the point where she's still writing at night. I think at some point she does get her degree. She gets together with this nonprofit and she publishes this book, Made. That seed had a process in order to evolve to the point where she could write the book, find the person who connected her in order to get published, and now the seed has been blooming for her. But in the midst of all of that, how do we stay in answered prayer? In the challenges. I met another gentleman at my nephew's football game, and he had a Vietnam veteran hat on, and I thanked him for his service, and he started sharing about his life. And once again, this guy's had the most challenging situation. Alcoholic father, I think he died early. Mother was a prostitute. Went to foster care, abusive foster care father. Lived underneath a bridge from 9 to 16. Scavenged for food. Found his mother again, I think at 16. At 17 joined, I think it was the Army or Marines. I'll have to get that from him. Was in Special Forces and was only 3 out of 11 people who survived an attack, all right? Had 3 heart attacks. All right, so I'm looking at this guy And I'm like, dude, you've had enough, you know? But I asked him, I go, and his name was Richie. I go, so Richie, what makes you so resilient? What makes you so still available to the joy of the moment? Because we're cheering on his son and my nephew. And he looked at me and he pointed up. He goes, God. Now, his understanding of God may be different than my understanding of God, but I'm never going to argue because that faith that is his in God the Father for him through his Catholic faith is what sustained him as living in answered prayer. To the point that he survived in Vietnam, and then he went to school because he wanted to have a better life. But he had prayer sustaining him this whole time. So how is it that when we have certain ideas that we've planted and they're not blooming, how often do we then just walk away from it saying, this stuff doesn't work? Do you know how many New Thought friends I have? Like, these principles don't work. I'm like, well, I got news for you. I go, if you're doubting, then it's working. The law is just like, hey, she wants more doubt. Give her more doubt. If you're saying it has to be hard, beautiful, ordered hard again, all right, you know? Or if it's like, I'm not good enough, I think she has the same order, or he has that same order, all right? And so it's that looking at our thoughts, because that law is impersonal. So whatever is underneath operating as our habits in the unconscious, we've got to cultivate through our prayer work, through our practice, through our meditation, through our understanding that source energy that's infinite, that is God, is operating as our life. So to live in answered prayer, it's beyond faith, because faith is carrying Richie, but it's that understanding and knowingness that all is in perfect divine right action and order. And no matter what the world wants to tell me, I have to know that with every ounce of my beingness, and then I trust the process. And to live it, I've got to feel it. So if I want a house because I want to experience love and joy and beauty every day in some way, I must embody love, joy, beauty. If I want a job that uses my gifts and I want wisdom present and creativity, I must embody that wisdom and creativity. I must stand in the truth of the awareness that I am that space, that place, and not from our ego, because sometimes I feel like we get lost in the ego part of our humanity. It's the way that divine shows up. That each one of you here is that absolute spark of God that has something to give to the world. And to live in answered prayer is to know that this and something greater is being perfectly unfolded in divine right action and order. And when I have my doubt, then I sit in my prayer work in gratitude, certainty, that assurance that all is unfolding perfectly. I must radiate that. I must know that. And despite any appearance, that I must claim that. Despite the naysayers in your life, what are you doing? What do you mean you want to write a book, all right? You know, what do you mean you want to stop being a lawyer and start a nonprofit, which I had a friend do? You know, you'll run into other people's doubt, other people's fear, other people's projections. Your job is to stay true to you. Your job is to know that you're being perfectly guided. Your job is to listen. But it's that feeling tone. So if we're spiritual broadcast systems and we're radiating out, and I've got this idea and I'm putting this out to the universe, I also, though, must be magnetically allowing myself to receive it. To receive it. And the way we know it's attuned with our heart, because it aligns, it feels right. There's a nudge that happens. I cannot tell you how many times I've been so perfectly guided, but that whisper of intuition was so subtle. It was like okay, let me go this way. And I run into that perfect person. Or that person walks in the door and we walk in at the same time. I call these divine appointments. I call this answered prayer. It's the little step along that pathway, and it's never straight. It's always a zigzag or a swirl or a spiral. But my job is to understand that in the human experience, there is an unfoldment that happens. In the mind of God, it's done. But think about a time in your life when you planted a seed, an idea that you planted and you forgot about. But because you forgot about it, you didn't add any doubt or fear. And then all of a sudden, you start seeing this little bud. And all of a sudden you're reminded like, oh, I remember that. And you go back to your journals, if you're like me. Oh, 2 years ago I said I wanted to do that. Oh, here it is. And then you act surprised. You're like, oh, I planted the seed. Perfect, all right? And think about a time in your life without judgment that you planted a seed and then you met up against other people's judgment and you allowed yourself to be convinced by them that it wasn't a good idea. And in those moments, you forgive yourself. In those moments, you understand that you're operating from the lesser, not the greater. In those moments, you understand that those people are operating from their unskilled or maybe unhealed behavior. Our job is to align in the truth that no matter what it is that is seeking to reveal itself, if I'm going to live and answer prayer, I have to know it's already so. It is done unto me as I believe. I must be it, I must live it, I must see it, and then in that space that no matter if it's not present in the moment, I have great gratitude for it. It's in those moments when the gratitude happens, it's in those moments when you're in that resonance, it's in those moments when you're in that holy yes, that it does arrive, and be ready. Because they're not going to send you a notice. Your package will be here tomorrow at 3:30. Are you ready? Because sometimes we do get these clues and we miss them. So what seed are you willing to plant today? What seed are you willing here in this consciousness of this knowingness of the indwelling presence that is God, that which is greater? And when we say surrender, it's a surrendering of the ego. It's surrendering of the doubt. It's surrendering of the fear. It's surrendering, and you can feel it because I want to presence it, but then you move into that greater reality that love is stronger and more powerful than any four-letter word that is fear. Love is more potent than anybody's judgment. And if the divine is seeking to reveal itself as my life, then who am I to say no? Who am I to say no? Who am I to say no? I'm not going to teach mindfulness. I don't want to have a nonprofit. Who am I to say no? Oh, you're going to invite me to a conference? I don't know if I have time for that. We answer with our yes. And the living answer is already arriving. And our job is to water the seed with love. The one thing that we lack is devotion. I'm a mystic gal. I love the divine with my whole heart and soul. I'm all about devotion. And devotion isn't about something outside of me. Devotion is about God. There's this intelligence that I call God. It is the impulsion of life that is love. And that love is in action as my life. And that love is in action as everybody's life. And it's a big love fest when we're demonstrating our good. And I don't need to be jealous because that's God demonstrating and God demonstrating and God demonstrating and God demonstrating. And when I'm in that love, it's expansive, it's exciting, it lifts us. And when we are devoted to the idea of the divine mind that I call God, that's seeking to express as your life, that then we are wowed in the wonder of who you are in every moment. Because we cannot stop God. It is far more powerful than who we are. We are that expression, that singular individual expression. And we must bloom because the world needs us. So when you see people in competition instead of cooperation, that's fear. That's the ego. Add love. When you've planted a seed, an idea, and doubt comes up, or your husband says, hey, I don't know about that. I don't know if you really should be doing the sound healing business like a friend of mine. Let love lead. Because love is more powerful. When we see what's happening in the world, we have to understand that, hey, I'm going to be that place that love reveals itself. So I'm going to invite you right now to take a moment and go within.
I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm so grateful that you took your time to watch or listen to this message. If you found this message beneficial, I would ask that you go to our website, agapecsl.com. Once there, click on the donate button and experience the joy of conscious and purposeful giving. Or if you would like, text your gift by simply dialing 972-532-6976. It is through your gifts that we are able to bring this message to you in the world. I would ask that if you like this message, to please subscribe to my YouTube channel under my name, Lee Wolak. Again, I want to thank you for joining me in the Agape community as we learn how to better self-love through conscious living.